Tales from the streets.
Dr. Mehra, I'm happy to have you back. I appreciate your time. And just to kind of outline what were the interests in speaking with you again, other than we just enjoy speaking with you. In light of, let's just say the last 12 months, there's been a lot of violent activity, highly publicized, recorded, shared on social media, news. I mean, just anywhere anyone can listen to it. And the thought came that, how is this impacting our children? But let me just tell you, it impacts me. Like some of the stuff, I'm like, I didn't want to see that. I've seen stuff like that in real life. I don't need that. And it just made us think, like, how could we help protect or things to look for in our children with all these things going on, and how to raise, emotionally strong and healthy children.
Can I piggyback a little bit on that
Yeah.
too? I wanted, when you were talking to me about bringing him back, I thought it was important because not just what we're seeing on social media, but people's responses that we're seeing on social media are also, in my opinion, have been pretty horrific. And this becomes an issue, with us. We kind of have a stance of a law enforcement first responder, but this becomes an issue for us because our kids are seeing this and they're thinking this is an acceptable response. And so therefore, 5 years, 10 years down the road, the kids that are seeing this stuff, they're now going to become law enforcement issues. They're going to become the ones that we're having to deal with. And it's because of the foundation that's being poured for them. It is flawed. The concrete is not good right now. So I thought it was important too. When you brought this up, I was like, this is going to be a great conversation to have with him, because it all goes full circle. That's the thing.
Yes, well, Tyler and Mo, I'm honored to be back with you both, and certainly it's a mutual feeling of enjoying our conversations and our dialogue. Tyler, you use the word seeing, right? Whether as an adult or youth and children, seeing and vision is a very important part of the emotional reaction process. And let me explain that further. When we see something, chances are when you walk into a room, your vision is more than likely the first thing that's going to send some emotional cues to your brain, because vision is directly connected to the limbic system of the brain. The limbic system of the brain is what helps modulate our emotions. And so the images that are seen, and especially if we're talking about first responders and our veterans, that the images that they see, you all are familiar with the term post-traumatic stress, and that one of the quote symptoms is the visual imagery that our soldiers and our first responders carry with them. And that is an important piece, because if we're talking about youth, that exposure to those visual images, we don't know what the long-term impact's going to be, but what I can share with you is just a common sense opinion. When I was a 10-year-old, I wasn't seeing these images, right? I was maybe watching I Love Lucy. I'm old enough to say that, or the Carol Burnett show. That was about as extreme as things got. And so what we're exposing our children to are really adult-related themes that are impacting them now and have the potential to impact them for a lifetime. Because the other reason is that if we're talking about a 10-year-old, is that their brain is still developing. And especially in males, the brain is not fully developed till about age 25, where the frontal lobe is fully developed.
Right.
I can attest to that.
Yes. Well, I'm sure we all can. So besides that, it's not even the images. Let me be even more foundational than that. And that is, and this is my opinion, I may have previously said this, the more time we spend in front of a screen, any kind of screen, is the less amount of time we're spending either being outdoors or spending in front of another human being in a meaningful, real interaction, not a virtual interaction, but a real interaction.
So can I ask you a question about that? Because I'm kind of a nerd sometimes, so I watch interesting stuff that's people way smarter than me talk about. And one of the things when you were talking about the limbic system, that in the ages of like teenage years, there's something that happens called synaptic pruning, where your brain starts pruning out the parts that you're not using, and the parts that you are using get fed or grown. So if our kids are exposed to these small screens or screens in general, or they're seeing these awful visions that are tied to our limbic system, what's the concern about how their brain is going to prune out what they're not using and what they are using in that situation? Or can you kind of talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah. I wish there was an absolute answer to that. Certainly
Hmm.
for me, it's not a positive thing with that pruning that's going
Right.
on. And that's only been recently, even, when I say recently, maybe the last 10, 15 years, where that concept is really being, and I want to be clear with your audience. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a
Got it.
scientist in that way. I'm a very simple
Me neither,
thinker
sir.
about things. And that if you take a step back and if that pruning of the neurons is happening in the brains of our youth and what they're digesting, and if the negative part is way outweighing the positive things they're viewing
Hmm.
or hearing or talking about, of course that's going to have a negative impact.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing I was putting together. It's not. I've had my own struggles with my own children where they're just watching mind-numbing nothingness on whatever
Mm.
social media or internet or whatever. But then couple that with, again, it's not a political thing, but like you're just seeing horrible things being done to human beings, and then you have somebody commentating they
Right.
deserved it. This is why it just you're dehumanizing people in a way at a very young age that I'm like this has to be having a I mean, it gets me all riled up, and I'm in my 40s, let alone somebody who's that young.
Yeah.
And then you tell them, like, they ask you a basic question, and I'm like, well, you have the World Wide Web, and they don't associate that they can look up something productive with the same device they spend hours on a day watching nothingness, just mind-numbing images, whatever it is they're watching. But with all that being said, not just the screen time, but with the rhetoric, the visuals, and all that, you're talking about development and the staging. I mean, I've seen kids as young as, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, where they're just glued to an iPad or whatever. Like, how is that impacting them in their development and then their ability to learn or experience life
Or
outside of that
connect.
little bubble? Yeah, or connect to another human being.
Yes, so that's a great question. I believe, screen time for whatever and I believe this is a false understanding for young parents that if you have a 1-year-old and you put a educational video
Mm-hmm.
in front of them, that's not really, to my knowledge, a recommendation by the American Academy of Pediatrics, right? Is that because at that age, if we're talking about learning and we're talking about human connection, there's no substitution for that other than another human.
Hmm.
And Tyler, you used the word dehumanized. Well, if we're immediately using video content and we're limiting the amount of human interaction early in infancy or in toddlerhood, we're already setting a foundation and a premise for decreased social interaction. Because the old saying that mother is first teacher is absolutely true. It
Hmm.
is that human to human interaction, the talking, the singing, the reading, the touching. Humans are still animals. I know we don't
Yes.
want to think about it that way, but we
No,
are.
they don't. No, they don't.
They
You're
We
right.
don't, but
don't
we
because
are.
we want to, if we're using robots now, right, to keep us from being lonely. I mean, that right there says volumes and things. And so the earlier that we can educate parents, and not in a judgmental way or a threatening way, but
Right.
to remind them, because the chances are they were raised that way. So
Yeah.
they're
Correct.
replicating what they went through themselves. And that
Yeah.
is really the early stage with whether it's the development of self-esteem, whether it's even the development of moral development and things. That's where things start in those early infancy and toddler ages.
So,
I think too, some of the things we're seeing, and I've heard this twofold. I told you guys I started substitute teaching at my son's school, and yeah, I know it's crazy.
get
I don't know
exposed to
why I'm
all of
doing
it,
this.
Mo.
I don't know why I'm doing this. So doing that and just interacting with other parents. And I hear a lot of parents will say, well, my parents did this with me and I just didn't want to do that with my kid. So I think some of it is replication, but I think some of it is they think that they have reinvented the wheel somehow with a better way of doing things and forgetting that, like you said, we are animals and we have been raising children for a very long time. And the basic needs of a child have to be met for them to feel safe, secure, and for their self-esteem to begin to be created from a positive pour, essentially, instead of a negative pour. And I think that sometimes parents, because they want to divert from what they felt like their parents did, they didn't like, they didn't whatever, that they've diverted so much that it's putting our kids backwards, in my opinion, my humble opinion.
Yeah, no, I fully understand and agree with what you're saying. That again, that lack of human to human interaction, and it, yeah, it represents, the ages of 0 to 5. The
Hmm.
reason, many reasons why that's significant. That's where we develop who we are emotionally, and the concept is called social referencing. What that means is that who we are as adults, it doesn't mean that it's not impacted later in life, but that's
Hmm.
where the foundation is. Social
Right.
referencing has to do. We learn how to modulate our emotions, sadness, happiness, grief, anger, by the visual cues we see around our environment. If we're talking about the family of origin, it's not even necessarily the words that are being said, it's the
Hmm.
nonverbal communication. That is
Hmm.
what lays down the foundation, because even if you're a 25-year-old and you're a first responder and your sergeant comes in and he's yelling and stuff, or he's throwing stuff down on the table, you're going to internally have an emotional reaction of stress
Right.
to that. And that's why even stress, and that's why emotions are contagious. And that's
Yeah,
not really even kind of processed in that way,
I
because
see.
they are. We feed upon each other. And
Yeah.
that rather than being negative, let's focus on the positive of being hopeful, optimistic, kind. Children can start developing empathy at a very young age and can discern these kinds of things depending on what they're seeing and what
Hmm.
they're hearing in their environment.
Well, that ties into, we were having a offline conversation about self-esteem.
Hmm.
And do you mind talking about that? Because when self-esteem starts and the process therein.
Sure, happy to do so. Yeah, it's my opinion that self-esteem actually even begins before birth. And what I mean by that is that parents have expectations on the unborn child. They have dreams, they have fantasies, which are appropriate to have those dreams about what that child is going to become. But hypothetically, let's say the baby is born and there's a congenital heart defect, and the baby is then in neonatal ICU, and it impacts the attachment and the bonding and the emotional reaction the parent may have that could be compromised. And consciously or unconsciously, the parent's dreams could then potentially go south. Well, okay, well, my child has this and probably may not be able to do this. But that may be a reality, but we still have to maintain hope and optimism that even if there's a diagnosis, because when you think about it, at older ages, at teenagers, our self-esteem is then tied into what other people think about
Hmm.
us, right? But the starting point is, what do we think about ourselves?
Yeah.
And what we think about ourselves is what happens in ages 0 to 5, because it is the caregiving. Is that are our parents or the primary caregivers responding to our needs? Because the message that sends is that I have value. I matter in this world, and someone is paying attention to me.
Yeah.
That is the genesis of self-esteem.
What's funny is when we were having the conversation offline and, you posed the question, when does self-esteem start? I thought, oh, I know it happens when the baby's born because they're starting to interact with people. But when you said no, it happens, when the baby's in the belly still, I thought about it thinking back to when I was pregnant with my son. And I absolutely, the day I knew I was pregnant with, in fact, we went through IVF. So the day they did the implant, I already thought he's a boy. This is what I wanted, how I want to raise him, even down to, what am I going to eat while I'm pregnant so I can make sure that I'm taking care of him. And I feel like you said, they already can start to feel I matter even in that stage. So that got my brain really turning.
Yeah. And it's something I've actually been talking about with other people. Just again, I'm a man, so I'm, I don't carry a baby, but we were talking about it in the office, and it was just like, think about people who get married young or have kids young. Actually, that part doesn't matter, but when they're in a stressful situation, either their job or their home life, whatever, and they're just dumping all that cortisol into a developing child. And I mean, numerous things, the diet, whatever else, other exposures. There's so much that can impact that child before it's even born. And then what does that environment look like? So no, you definitely tapped into something. My brain kind of started rifling through all these conversations I've had. I'm like, in my opinion, that's 100% correct, because it all impacts how the baby's going to, potentially come out. Again, human beings are great. They're adaptable. They figure it out, right? You could be born in a terrible circumstance and still achieve success and
Absolutely.
all the positive things for sure. But it's just like things, I guess, you don't think about. And I had my kids, well, we had our kids very young, I should say, very young. And thinking about if I were to do it now, like it would be such a different environment, and I have such a different temperament, shall we say. But I want to move on from that, unless there's something you want to add on to that, Dr. Mills. Do you want to tap into the 6D video? Because I think it's great. We can just talk about it and I'll put a link to it, or we can get into the moral development. I don't know if they kind of correlate, how you want to address that.
Sure, a little bit. Tyler, the 6D effect video covers the topic of youth violence and self-harm. And it goes through what the 6D factors are. And the video is about 4 minutes long, and it's designed to educate adults and parents and caregivers about paying attention, because if we're talking about violence, it does not just come out of the air that all of a sudden a 17-year-old is going to be violent. There's certainly risk factors that are in play, and that's what the video goes through.
So there's 6Ds. I'll just list them, and then we can go one by one, if that's okay.
Sure.
Discussion, despair, depression, disengagement, drugs, and denial. I don't know if those are a specific order, but discussion, what is that?
Yeah, the discussion part has to do with, it is fine. We can jump around with it. The discussion part has to do with the fact that, and this would be probably for any age of a child, that if a family of origin is having, which is happening in today's world, some very strong social, political views about whatever side one may be on, how and what is said is what impacts our youth and what they're digesting. Because I can tell you, it was probably not even till in my 30s that I even had a very remote conversation about politics with my parents. That was not something, it's not because my parents were not educated or they didn't care or they didn't pay attention, but that wasn't the topic at the supper table about what is happening. We were talking about, well, how was your day? What happened at school today? And those kinds of things. And so the tone and the content of what is said are one of the factors that influence our youth, and especially if it can go either way. Maybe what the youth is thinking aligns with what the parents saying, and that could even promote them to take an action to go do something, or it could be an opposing view. There's no way to guarantee any of that. The purpose of that is just exercise caution in what you are saying and how you are saying it, whether it's verbally or you're posting it on social media and other things, because it's all of that our youth are digesting. They're watching the adults around them. Adults are all arguing and being disrespectful to each other, which is what is occurring. Then it's a natural conclusion that they're going to experience the osmosis of that disrespect.
Right.
You bring up a valid point. I don't think I ever thought about politics in a strong way till I was maybe in college. And I was like, even then I was like, what's happening? Why does it matter? I'm trying to play football. I'm doing, whatever. I'm just like, it has no bearing on my life. But now, yes, even I remember my kids, even middle school, they were holding school elections on who they should vote for. And like, it was just wild shit.
My son is elementary age, and I was going to say the same thing, Tyler. When they have election talk, they will do entire lessons in school about it. They will have mock elections and things like that. And I don't think that we should make our kids ignorant to the fact of how the system works, but I don't think that we should, in an elementary age and such a young age, it's not necessary that they understand those things to the level that I think they're getting now. And the other point I want to ask you, Doctor, was the other side is when you said about dinner table, I thought, Yeah, that's very good. But I can tell you that there are a ton of kids nowadays, they don't sit around a dinner table. They sit around a
That's
television, or
yeah.
their conversations, their discussions are not occurring with the adults that are important in their lives. They're occurring with other kids who have watched social media and taken their interpretation or are showing them things. And I realize that because I am very I shield my son. I'm not gonna lie. I shield him from seeing some of the things that are going on in the world because he's too young to be able to truly digest them. But
Yeah.
I know I also have to still have some level of discussion with him, and it's very surface leveled. And people do bad things. This is how we should respond. We don't do like that kind of discussion because his friends in elementary school are coming to school and talking about these things based off of social media posts that they've seen or based off what they've put together in their collective group. So the dinner conversations of how are you going, how was your day to day, they are almost non-existent nowadays.
Yes. Well, Mo, you made three amazing points. Number one, so let me address the election part in schools.
Hmm.
Certainly, I'm a believer in our youth and young adults knowing civics and knowing how this country is organized, the democracy, the republic part of things, and certainly having knowledge and understanding that, and the right to vote, certainly, and all of that. But I further agree with you that the details of like who to vote for at young ages, yeah, it's way premature. The way to summarize that is that our younger kids are being exposed to adult related themes that they hear about, yes, from their peers. And you're doing a very wise thing that encouraging your son to come to you for any questions, anything they're hearing and not understanding, and that you are the most reliable resource in their lives for the information they're consuming from their peer group. Now, to the part about the meals, yeah, there's plenty of research. Well, the youth may not be eating at the dinner table because their parents aren't, right?
Right.
That goes back to that social referencing.
Mm.
Children are watching the adults. And so if it's acceptable to be eating a meal and to be on your phone for whatever reason it is, then that becomes acceptable to the youth.
Right.
And you can't really argue with that as a parent because if you're doing it yourself
Right.
and things, and again, that's an opportunity for bona fide human interaction. As simple
Hmm.
as looking at someone in the eye, smiling, asking, "How was your day?" Because that's what builds trust over time. Such that if a youth is feeling discomfort or feeling troubled about something, is the environment comfortable where I can really share with my mom or with my dad what's going on, or are they distracted themselves?
Yeah.
I
You
always
just
tell
go ahead, Mom.
what I was going to say is I have a lot of, my son's young, so I have a lot of friends and they're like, "Oh, my kid has a tablet." When we're in the car, hand him the tablet. And I'm like, such a missed opportunity. We camp, so we travel a lot on the road. I've never let my son bring a tablet into the car because I've realized in that idle time, he'll just start talking. He'll just start sharing. He'll just start asking me questions. And I don't want to miss that opportunity. I'm not saying I'm perfect because there's times where I'm sure I miss opportunities and I know I do things. But those are the times where I'm like, I want to at least create the space for it to happen.
Yeah. And I was going to say, you flared my rage up for a minute with the kids eating or eating at the dinner table and your kids are on the phone. Nothing
Ugh.
will fire me up more, but I did get checked one time by my daughter. She's like, "How are you going to tell me I can be on my phone when you're on yours?" Now, my excuse was, "Well, this is work." And she's like, "What's the difference?" Fair enough. So that was a check on me. Fair enough. I wanted to slide into despair and kind of what you're describing with how those, well, I'll let you speak for yourself, but the discussions that are happening can lead to despair or recognize despair, I guess is what was the tie-in?
Yeah, the tie-in
Discussion,
was
despair.
is
Yeah.
remember that the theme is youth violence and self-harm.
Yes.
And so how is it they arrive at feeling despair?
Yes.
And that there's many, just again, we've covered the themes. Number one is that are they feeling valued, that they matter in this world? And I'm not talking about that parents need to buy expensive gifts and sneakers and take vacations to Europe as that someone values. It's the time.
Yeah.
It's the time, quality time, uninterrupted time that they matter. For example, you tell your 12-year-old, hey, listen, on Saturday when we wake up, we're going to make some pancakes together. And Saturday morning comes by and you don't follow through on making those pancakes. Yeah, you're not helping yourself. You're not helping your child with conveying that they matter, because kids remember, and younger kids even pay attention. They know way more of what's going on emotionally than even what us adults do. So number one, do they feel valued? Number two, despair. If they're consuming so much negativity on social media, whatever platform that it is, or whatever news it is, how is a brain that is developing supposed to feel hope unless there's a intentional strategy, whether it is faith, whether it is hobbies, whether it is bona fide sports, not gaming. I'm not a fan of gaming. Don't come to me telling me that that's a hobby. Right?
Well,
You're not, the thing is, Tyler, at this, doing this for 35 years, I think that while I don't have a PhD, I do have an MD, is that I'm entitled to a little bit of an opinion at observing human behavior
Yes, sir.
and things. And so these fundamental are the two basic things. And the third thing is the disconnection from other humans.
Yeah.
Right? Is bona fide relationships, right? Is that our communication in today's world is distilled down to electronic communications, emails, emojis, and other things. That's why with you, Tyler, I said, when can we get coffee? Having
Yes.
no knowledge that you're up north. But I also shared with you, don't be surprised if I knock on your door one day, because I'm the kind of guy that will just show up and say, Tyler, I already warned you I was coming. But I'd be a little bit more socially appropriate than just kind of showing up randomly with my backpack and wanting to spend the night and eat supper with you all. But I would.
No, I hear you. You're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
I will say, with all these things, think about that. Elementary school, you're having elections, politics, foreign politics, whatever the fuck I'm trying to say, video games, all the social media. In elementary school, I was like, yo, I got this cool G.I. Joe. And I was trying to like race bikes. Like, I mean, again, all that stuff wasn't available to me. I'm not downing anyone because it's, get it. What are
Here's the thing though, I say,
those effects?
the basics of parenting, the basics hasn't changed. Like you said, kids, and it's so funny when you said, Doctor, about how kids remember, it's so funny because like I told you, I'm subbing and I am subbing a 4th grade class. And last week they did really good because I was not in the classroom for a couple hours and they had a substitute. When I came in, I told them, you guys did really good. The sub really bragged on you guys. Next week on Monday, I'm going to bring a treasure box so that all of you guys can pick from it. I said, I don't have enough items for the whole class today, so I'll be back. I came into work today. I'd ordered it from Amazon. It didn't get here. Sorry, Amazon. Y'all didn't do your job. It didn't get here on Sunday. So I walked in and every one of my students just about said, Miss Greco, you told us you were going to bring us this, did you?
Well, yeah.
Like clockwork. And I think the other part of that is every time I have told them I'm going to do something, I've done it. And when I failed to do it, they were like, what? I explained to them, though, I took the time to say, this is what happened. I ordered it. It didn't get delivered. It's supposed to be there tomorrow. My hope is it will be here tomorrow and we will do the treasure box on Tuesday. It might seem like it's something small, but I realized in listening to their 4th grade minds and logic when they were talking to me, it mattered because it made them feel important, like you said.
Yes. And the way you just handled that is laden with so much. Number one, parents, you can't be perfect. It won't be perfect. You will make mistakes or mistakes that happen beyond your control. It's okay. When it happens with a child, number one, you take some responsibility for it. Kids often ask some very difficult questions. Answer the questions with a simple response. Do not ignore the questions being asked.
Right.
Take ownership of them. Because again, if you ignore the question, then it sends a message that what I'm asking for really doesn't matter to you. And clearly I don't matter to you and things. So that's how you handle it is very important. Now, the other topic that when we're talking about despair, Tyler, is that when you look at the other things that's changed, and I'm 63, and I know that I do not look a day over 70. when I was in school, we were not having drills for school shootings, right?
Yeah.
We were
Nope.
having tornado drills. And so again, when you speak of despair, and that's a reality, I'm not being critical of what a school system has to do and to educate
Right.
people, but if you stop and think what kind of message that is where we are in today's world. I just wanted to kind of mention that contributes to the emotional state of our kids.
No,
sure.
for sure. So the next one is then depression. So we've got the discussion aspect, the despair aspect, which ties into depression.
Yes, the depression part, because that's again one of the things that over the last 25, 30 year you're hearing a lot more about youth depression and anxiety, right? And the concern with that is that if it is true depression, that becomes again a risk factor for violence or for self-harm. Now, if you said to me, well, what's contributing to one of the most basic things of the depression, it's a combination of stuff, many of the areas we've already discussed. But one of the fundamental things that can change is sleep. Our youth and our adolescents are the most sleep deprived in the history of mankind.
Yep.
You're
You
speaking to my
all
daughter
know
right
why,
now.
because if that's the case, and if you accept that premise, the chances are the parents are not sleeping, and the parents are not
Yep.
sleeping because of the same reasons and things as the youth are not. Now, why is that even important? Well, it's important because sleep disturbance is a major precursor to every major psychiatric diagnosis and substance abuse. During sleep, the body, yes, is physically at rest. What's not fully understood is that during sleep, the brain is the most active during sleep. Not during the day, but during sleep. It is recalibrating the previous day, the memories, the learning, partially related mode to the pruning that you're talking about. That's why good, solid, quality sleep is important, not just for brain health and emotional development, but physical health as well. That is a factor that can be controlled before we go and start diagnosing our youth with bona fide clinical depression.
You're speaking to me and directly to my daughter, who does listen to my shows, but it's she has horrible sleeping habits and it drives me crazy, and I do my best, but she's almost an adult now and I do my best, but I constantly, like, you need to sleep 8 hours, 9 hours, whatever the hell it is, on a regular basis, not just on Saturday and Sunday.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
I will say that's one of the things, me and my husband, when we had our son, from the time he was very little, people thought I was crazy because at 2 weeks old, I started scheduling and I would make sure that he was, resting when he was, when they get to that age where they're not sure what day and night is. As soon as I could, I got him kind of flipped over and made sure he was getting good, solid sleep at night. And to this day, it's one of those things that he's young. He's still in elementary school and he'll go, all right, guys, I got to go to bed. Got to get me some rest. He doesn't joke, but because I think from the time he was an infant, we prioritized. I would say we need to make sure that he's hydrated. We need to make sure that he has a balanced diet, and we need to make sure he's resting, because if we meet those basic needs, then the other things, now he has a good foundation for us to start stacking the other building blocks on.
Absolutely.
Well, let me just say this. I know we're talking about the youth part, but having worked shift work for 15 years, and now that I don't, I'm losing weight. My physiological changes, my energy level, all these things are changing for the better, in my opinion. And I'm like, wow, I did 15 years of on again, off again, midnights, shift schedule changing every 2 weeks, sleeping patterns, crazy out of whack. Take all the above, and what a difference just a year has made.
Well, absolutely. And that's and whether it's first responder, military, shift work in a mill, whatever, airport, that's not an easy thing, and even physicians for that matter.
True.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yeah.
it's a difficult thing, and so it makes perfect sense now that you're able to regulate your sleep wake cycle with a little bit more regularity, where you're feeling better. Yeah, it's not an easy thing, but it's a precursor. There's no doubt about that.
Dr. Bear, I don't mean to get too off topic, but you said MD, so you did residency, I'm assuming?
Yes, 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, and 5 years of resident.
Did you have to
Mm.
do the like 12-hour midnights or 24 hours on deal?
Absolutely. Yes.
Is
Wow.
that ever going to go away? We'll get back on topic, but it is the people I've known that are in it. My mother, who recently went through it, she's like, and she was in her 50s when she did it. She's like, this is asinine. Why am I doing this? I don't
Well,
get
on
it.
on that, Tyler, I'm a little bit more old school on that, that
Got to do it.
you gotta do it. You gotta do it.
Fair enough.
You gotta be able to make decisions and pay attention to details when you're tired.
Respect it. All right. Sorry. That was just a
Yeah,
little side.
no, it's okay, because
Yeah.
it's not an ideal world that, everyone can always be refreshed and things and making certain decisions. And then, frankly, it becomes a workforce issue as well.
Yeah.
If we're
True.
talking about physicians and nurses, right?
Yeah.
There's a paucity. So yeah, we can't let go of that. Can there be more kindness and more appropriateness? Sure, a little bit. Yeah, there definitely can be improvements, but I'm not so convinced that that should go away.
Understood. That was it. I appreciate it. We'll move it on. The next one was disengage. Again, not in any particular order, but disengagement.
Yes, the disengagement is something we've talked about, where in today's world, and whether youth or adult are, and Tyler, you use the word dehumanize.
Yeah.
We are disengaging from each other, right?
Yeah.
When we see avatars, we see it's fascinating to me, all the comic movies and stuff. It feels like to me that we're consistency living in a virtual world, and that we're not here in reality. When years ago, when first time that I saw this, when it was I believe it was a homeless gentleman, who was on the sidewalk and was being kicked and stuff, and somebody was videotaping it
Right.
during the whole time. And I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, that complete connect
Yeah.
is there, that it's more important to create that TikTok video than it is to help a human being.
To help somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and again, I'm not going to highlight any specific event, but the rhetoric and the disgusting nature that goes on when you see someone's life be taken, which now is in graphic detail all over any app you want to choose and on the news and whatever else it is. And then it immediately springs into some other topic. And I'm like, that's still a human being. That's, that's
Yeah.
somebody's son, husband, dad, whatever it is. Or wife, mother, whatever, that part doesn't matter. And it's like, there's not even a pause, a moment to just recognize that. It immediately is like, depending on what your views are, well, yeah, good. Or, oh my God, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. Not because it was a human being, but because of whatever that human represented. Right. And I'm
Right.
like, where are the adults in the room to step back and be like, this is a human being that we just saw
Yeah.
get murdered or whatever. And again, it's all over.
And it's everything.
And I'm having to have these conversations with my kids. You know what I mean? They're teenagers. Sorry.
It's in general. No, you're right. And like you said, it started, I feel like, some years ago with people recording someone getting beat up. And now it's migrated to, we're seeing people, on a subway getting killed, and
Yeah.
people watch and walk around the person and leave. Nobody even holds the person's hand to say
Nothing.
and it's just, to me, it's gut wrenching, because I think, what is life going to look like for my child in some years? Because if that's where we're headed, that's the path we're going down. People don't see each other as humans. We're not connecting. And I think it goes back to like Doctor, you've been saying with the parenting part. We have a lot of parents that they give these kids devices at a very young age. Okay, let's take out the impacts neurologically or how the kid's developing, but add in the fact that you spend, from the time your child is 0 to, we'll say, 12 or 13, handing them a tablet, never having conversations with them. Then when they hit 12 or 13, and now they're giving you a fit at your house because they don't feel connected or tethered to you, and you call the cops and you go, well, do you talk to him? Well, he won't talk to me. You never taught him to talk to you.
You're exactly right, because that foundation wasn't there for the communication, right? Because there was a substitute parent in place, and so the relationship wasn't there, and that's what the basic compromise is. And it's not even necessarily for youth, but for adults,
Right.
is the degree of the relationship. And some of this was fueled by the pandemic, even though it was already there. And I'm public with this opinion, is that really believe the federal government blew it when they called it social distancing. It should
Right.
have been called physical distancing. The social distancing got interpreted that you could not be in the same room with another human.
Right.
And you could be if you maintained the 5 feet or whatever science is saying
Right.
now. And that got turned into a whole mindset of where you can't be around people. And
Yeah.
Right.
already when that disengagement was there, we're now even still paying the price from that.
Right.
And I think we talked about it last time, and I want to get back onto the 6. I brought this up. My neighbor's son, who was, I think, like first grade, he was young, and during that time period, he got real depressed. I was like, well, and I was trying to understand. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, he's home. He's like, yeah, he thinks his friends don't like him because they don't hang out with him anymore. Like, he wasn't understanding it was social distancing, physical. He's like, they couldn't. He's 6. He just thinks
Right.
they don't like him anymore, so that's why
Yeah.
they don't hang out. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think of it that way. Like, how do you explain
Mhm.
that to a 6-year-old,
Yeah.
and how that affect, anyway, sorry, moving on. So the last, I don't know, drugs and denial, do they correlate, or you
No,
separated them? So
not
how do you,
Yeah, not necessarily in my mind. The drugs has to do with, again, remember that these 6Ds are risk factors
yeah,
Right.
and things. And the drugs specifically refers to vaping. We're in a world of cannabis cards and things. And my opinion on that, number one, is the quality of cannabis, the potency over the last 40 years has only increased in terms of, argument could be made, well, no, our teenagers or youth are smoking less marijuana. Okay, well, that's all nice. But when you've sat where I have seen cases clinically where cannabis was a precipitant to someone becoming psychotic, meaning they're losing contact with reality. Hallucinations, delusions, I have seen that. I have treated that clinically. And the vaping, trendy to do that, that's just another risk factor of things. The denial part is that when you look at either whether it was a youth or a adult who either harmed themselves or harmed someone else, everyone denial is a defense mechanism, and it's not a healthy defense mechanism. That
Right.
people believe that this could never happen in my family or this could never happen in my kid to do something like that.
Yeah.
so okay, now I'm tracking the marijuana thing, which again, it's one of those things. But to your point, you now have people on, prolific people very famous, who are throwing down, 1,000 milligrams of THC in one set, like just bloop, gulping it down, or they're talking about how they like to put the oil and the butter. I mean, I don't even know all this stuff, all combined, and then they ingest it, smoke it, whatever. I'm like, holy shit! Like, it's a far cry from back in the day, Mo, with like seeds and stems and sticks and stuff, bro. So I
Yeah,
understand what
yeah.
you're saying.
No,
And then
no,
the
Tyler,
denial.
you're right. One of the things I
Yeah.
don't want your listeners to conclude that I'm anti-medical marijuana. I think that there is a time and appropriate place for that. It's just that that appropriate time and place has become broader.
Yeah.
And what that does, especially for our youth, it sends a message, oh, okay, well, you've got a car, so why can't I do this? Well,
Yeah.
well, try, if you're already not communicating with your kids, try communicating the rationale for that as to why a kid shouldn't do that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
And then the
Yeah, I
denial
get
part, I
that.
just want to dive into that a little bit. I can't tell you, Mo, again, law enforcement stuff. I can't believe this happened. I never saw this coming. I didn't know. Again, in either self-harm or violent acts, they're like, I never knew. And then as a law enforcement, you kind of dig into the investigative side, and you're like, how in the hell did you not know with all these signs? Maybe the denial is also just willful ignorance, or they just don't want to see it, maybe, Doc?
Yeah, it's human nature, right? It's painful.
Yeah.
It's painful to even think about that. If we're especially thinking about suicide among our youth or young adults, and no one wants to think that way, it's always something that's going to happen to someone else. It can never happen in my family.
Yeah.
And that's really, if we're really going to try to move the needle and educate people, is that that needs to be explored and understood.
Mhm.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Bo, anything?
Well, I was just thinking when he was talking about the denial piece that it goes back to I think it's easy to deny too if you don't have that human connection, and the connection goes two ways. As a parent, if you haven't been having conversations and taking that time to sit your phones down, sit your kids' phone down and truly connect with them, you can easily miss some of the signs that a person from the outside looking in will go, how did you miss those? Because I remember the
Yeah.
same way as you, Tyler, like, what do you mean? This kid was crying for help throughout the whole process, but they weren't noticed because the parent was engulfed in their own life or what was going on with them, or they failed to have that very, that connection that happens when you are sitting down with your 3-year-old on the ground and rolling a ball back and forth, or when you have your child come home from school and they're 5 and they have 8 million words to tell you about their day and you're going, "Oh my god, I'm so exhausted." But you have to make that time to listen to those 8 million, and because that is where you're going to connect with them. And when they're 14, 15 and they're having despair or they're having depression or they're having that detachment that we've been talking about, they're going to be willing to say, like the doctor said, you are my most reliable source of information, so I'm going to come to you.
Yes, absolutely. And again, and I don't want to be naive. I'm fully clear that young parents in today's world have a tremendous amount of stress
Yes.
that they are under. We have to be mindful that assuming that someone has Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that they have adequate food, water, and shelter and things. But again, that raising healthy children emotionally and physically, if you have the basics and if you're feeling overwhelmed, reach out for help. Ask for help from trusted family, friends, other social service organizations, rather than quietly suffering with the challenges you are facing.
Well said. Fantasy versus reality.
Yes.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah, that's what I alluded to earlier, that because of the, you know, it's and I understand the value, but always I'm a Libra, and Libras are very critical people and critical of myself. And when I see all these cool glasses and the virtual reality of things, and certainly I see the value where that can be used in technology or whatever it is, but where my mind also goes, it's again leading people down a path of living in a fantasy land and not really having the fundamental things that used to happen on the playground is negotiation and navigating conflict, right? Where somebody took your marbles, right? Took them out, maybe they broke a rule or something like that.
Yeah.
And over time, you've got to be able to navigate that starting even as a kid and understanding the communication and how do you do that. And that, when I say is fantasy land, that so much time is being spent in the virtual world where if we're looking at some of the violent gaming that happens, again, if it's developing brains, what is somebody consuming? And I do not need to hear about research or where's the research that shows that. I don't need any research. All I need to know is that the less time you're spending in front of another human and you're doing something virtually that is not productive, you're not really helping yourself unless you're really learning how to fly a plane and you're becoming a pilot. Then I support it.
Yeah.
It's fair.
No, fair enough. And again, I love video games. I'm get to my point here. I love video games. I played them with my kids. I still do. But there's games out there now where they're like teaching you. Well, there's some very dark games. I don't want to get into all that, but there's some very dark games where you play Russian roulette with yourself and you do just wild things. And I'm like, that's not a video game. Like, what's the point of this? What's happening? You're not learning anything. You're not building anyway. I don't want to get too much on that because we're going to get destroyed by gamers. They're going to freak out on us, but I understand what you're saying. But I grew up playing Mario Brothers and Final Fantasy. I don't know, just games that made you feel good and you could pause it and get back to it and it's fine. Like it wasn't the end of the world if,
Yeah,
Let me tell you
in
difference,
limited
though.
ways. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to,
No.
kind of a blanket over everything. Certainly, there's value if something's fun and is creating an interaction, family interaction or something, and is causing some fun in a limited amount of time, as long as
yeah.
there's some interaction. But you and I, we all know that so many friends that young people have are virtual friends who live in other places, and they're not really able to really navigate any conflict in person with someone, even though
Yeah.
there's conflict happening virtually and via emails,
Yeah.
and all these things are
Yeah.
happening. It's just the paradigm is just fascinating.
Well, I would ask my son. He was a big gamer, still is to a point.
To a
But I'm like,
point.
"What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm hanging out with my friends," and I'm like, "There's nobody here." Oh, you know, we're all on this game together, and that was considered hanging out. I'm like, "What,
It's
dude?
not.
No!" Like, anyway,
That's what I was going
I
to say.
digress.
Like when we played video games back in the day, like Mario Brothers, we would have to go to each other's houses. We'd have
Yeah,
to play together. We'd have to negotiate taking turns because you'd have
yes,
somebody who was better than someone else. So there was still, there was a element of that negotiation that occurred
mhm,
that our kids have lost because I'm at my house, you're at your house. We're talking over on a mic to each other. If I don't like what you do, then I can respond on a game and technically kill you. And, and it's like, that's wild to me when you talk about it. And it's one other thing I wanted to point out was I was reading a book about parenting in other countries. And in Denmark, they have been like rated as some of the happiest countries. And I was just reading the book for the heck of it. One of the things that I thought was very interesting for them, their playgrounds are not like, you don't have like little kid playgrounds and big kid playgrounds. They have just playgrounds where you have kids of varied ages. They all play together and the parents typically do not hover. So you might have a kid that is 7 or 8 playing with a kid that's like 12, and they learn how to work with each other and be communal on this playground area and solve their problems. They can't come tell their parents 'cause their parents like, I don't care, you guys work it out. And I think there is something, like you were saying, doctor, to be said about learning the conflict resolution that occurs at that social level with someone who is your age, because that is where, now fast forward, give them 10 or 12 years, and that person, they're dating somebody and they break up with them, or they go for a job and they don't get a job and their friend gets the job. We no longer know how to have those kind of interactions and still be okay. Like Mo and Tyler both go up for the same position. Tyler gets it. Well, I can't be Tyler's friend anymore because he got the job I want. Like, because
Yeah,
we haven't learned how to resolve those things in our own mind at a basic level.
yeah, no, for sure.
absolutely.
I kind of want to bring it back to the beginning. You brought it up right almost at the very beginning, empathy. But one, the development of empathy, and then where you see the issues are lying with all the things we just discussed and how that impacts them in their growth.
Yeah, well, empathy again starts in childhood.
Yeah,
And empathy is something where you teach children to be kind, thoughtful about others. And if somebody's in distress, talking to in the age appropriate way, talking to a child, well, how can you help your classmate with that? And those seeds are planted very early on. And that has a direct tie in to where we are, Tyler, when you said earlier, the harshness over some of the recent events that's happening and what's being posted. And yeah, there's an absence of empathy. And as I called them, the grown-ups, whoever they are unfortunately just kind of continuing this dialogue and things. And so it is something that can be developed, but it has to be intentionally developed.
What
yeah.
age do
Well, I'm sorry.
at what age do kids
The
develop
seeds
empathy in your
get
opinion?
planted early on. There's discrimination where even at maybe a year 1 or 2 years old, where children can start sensing when another baby is crying, what that may be about and stuff, and the sensitivity to that.
Very interesting.
Again, remember what I said about social referencing, that what happens between the ages of 0 to 5, that's when the seeds for these types of things get planted.
So I want to wrap it up with just a couple points, and Dr. Mehra, I'd just like your take on it. But we've talked about the visual side, but the rhetoric side, and I've talked about it on this podcast, the other one with 56, but the rhetoric towards, well, law enforcement. Let's just stick with that for right now. Law enforcement, you're hearing rhetoric about, they're calling law enforcement in the United States, they're comparing them to Nazis and kidnappers and foreign invaders and all this other stuff. And none of that's happening. They're just in the process of doing their job, right? That
Yes.
rhetoric is being spouted all over TV, social media, whatever, into the homes. And my point is this, I'll give you one story and then I'll ask the question. I remember walking into my son's classroom in kindergarten, almost 50-50. Half the kids super excited because I was in uniform, super excited, happy. Oh my God. The other half crying, scared, withdrawn, worried something was going to happen. They were terrified. And I remember having the conversation with the teacher, and she kind of explained, she's like, oh, well, some of them have had interactions with law enforcement, or their parents have, that kind of a thing. So I give you that story to ask this question. With the rhetoric that's going on, how is that impacting youth and their ability to trust the men and women who are there to keep them safe?
Yeah, it's a tremendous negative impact, right? Because if you distill down, is that, a first responder represents a authoritative figure, right? And so if that is being and it goes back to the 6D, Tyler,
Yep.
is that when I was talking about the discussion, if those words that are being said on social media, if they're being repeated at home, it reinforces already something the adults are hearing, repeating those kinds of things. And so, yes, is not a positive thing that is happening.
All right. And then that ties into my second question, and Mo, I'll kick it to you. Second question. And again, I desperately try to keep, it's not a political statement. This is more geared towards youth, children, things like that. Adults, I will debate this stuff all day. BJ and I do it all the time. Mo and I do it. But when you start talking about, you hear politicians talking about the world is coming to an end, like these massive things that are high level thinking, really, or for the environment or whatever it is, or overseas, like these countries that most kids in the US have never seen, they don't even know. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Like, they're throwing attention on these atrocities in another country that have nothing to do with maybe per se their community here in the US. What I've seen, because I've had these conversations with not just my kids but some of their friends, is it almost, it puts them in a place of despair. Like there's just no hope for them in the future. Like, well, why should I even try? Because the world's going to end and all these countries are going to come kill. It's like, it makes like a small town, a small community where you're a child and you should be playing soccer. I don't know, whatever. It's now like you're being inundated with, I should have all these other stresses placed upon me. How is that impacting it?
Yeah, it's right, because part of it is the 24/7 news cycle.
Yeah.
Bad things is what sells, right? Sells ads, it gets viewership, people watch
Yeah.
it, consume it, because of the lack of limits on and youth consuming the negativity. Yes, it's yet another thing that's contributing to the negativity. That's
Yeah.
why the positivity and the optimism requires attention. I mean,
Yeah.
if I were king of the world, I'd do away with social media. I mean, I'm okay to make that bold statement. Certainly, I see value in it. Don't get me wrong. There is
Right.
value to reconnecting with someone, but everything in life as a physician is a risk versus benefits analysis.
Correct.
Is that does this represent overall benefits versus the risk?
Well,
It's
you've
simple.
heard massive influencers. Joe Rogan comes to mind. I reference him a lot. I do listen to him, but there's other large ones, actors. Well, even our current president has mentioned it, but like they have these massive social media followings, but half of them, they're like, I don't ever, they'll just post something and they don't read, like they just throw it out into the world with your 100 million followers. And then they don't
Interesting.
actively engage with it, even though there might be 100 million people now that are all, they threw something out into the world and now it's like causing this frenzy, and their phone is just sitting on the coffee table while they're doing something else, right? They use it to push a message, but they don't actually engage with it, whereas a lot of people do.
I've developed a little inner thing for myself, is that if I can influence my two grandkids, ages 9 and 5, then I'll be ready to meet my maker. That's my
Hey, I like it. Solid goal. Mo, I'm sorry, I dominated the last 10 minutes. Go.
No, that's fine. I want to say, like, people, if we better realize that our social circles are much smaller than what we have on our social media footprint, and actually looked at the fact of, let me influence the people that I'm actually in contact with and not care about what the people on social media thinks, our world would probably be so much better, because that's the reality, is that even if you do have 1 million social media friends, they're not anybody that you are actually going to have real effect or real connection with.
They're not breaking bread with you in your house. Promise you that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Yeah, for sure. Dr. Mehra, anything you want to end with? This was great. I'm glad we
Yeah.
did this.
No, sir. I think we've covered a lot. I appreciate y'all's time. It's
Thank you
Absolutely.
for
always great to
coming
be on
again.
Street Tales.
That's
We
right.
love
That's
it.
right. And I'm going to put a link to not only your website, but that video specifically, if that's okay.
Sure, that'll be
The
fine, sir.
60, I thought it was excellent. So I recommend
Yeah.
everybody go to it, look at it, watch it. It's very informational. I was telling Dr. Mehra, I was like, I watched it and immediately I was like, damn it, his production quality is so good. It's a positive thing. I love it. But no, Dr. Mehra, thank you so much. I appreciate you availing
Yes.
yourself to be on our show. And now that you've done this, just know that next time something pops up, we might bring you back on just to talk about it.
That's fine.
Thank
Flo,
you,
anything?
sir. Nope, that's it. Thank you again.
Awesome.
It's always a good discussion.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to see you both.
Sam.